Horror is a genre that I have no real experience with. I dabble in games like Resident Evil, Lethal Company and Little Nightmares for example, but I don't really go out of my own way to play them. Unless of course they're multiplayer focused, so I can suffer with friends. This is because I'm a giant coward who hates anything scary, but that's beside the point. That being said, there is one horror game that has stuck in my mind like glue throughout the years, and to the surprise of no one who has watched my videos before, the game in question is old, not really talked about, and is on an old Sega console. The Sega Saturn is not really known for its horror games. Usually people only really know it for games like Bug, Knight, Sonic R, Burning Rangers, Panzer Dragoon, but there's a whole library of fantastic games hidden on the thing, lost to time. With the push to newer 3D hardware, more and more horror games are coming out making use of the new technology, pushing for impressive cutscenes, detailed pre-rendered environments and music that helps build tension. But the thing about visuals is that they age. Some games that looked amazing back in the day look quite dated by today's standards. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all games from that era are bad. I myself find that graphic style quite charming and love it when indie games use that same style nowadays. Along with that, I think games like Resident Evil 1-3, Silent Hill, Dino Crisis, Nightmare Creatures for example, still play perfectly well to this day. I'm just saying that visually, the wow factor has just kind of dropped off over the years. One game that I think should be more well known is one called Enemy Zero, made by Warp in 1996 and was counted as part of the D trilogy, because even though it does not share the same name as D1 and D2, it does however share some things like character names and, well, that's really it. I remember the first time I saw it, it was on a Sega Saturn demo disc. There was a gameplay demo of Sonic 3D Blast on there, but there was also something else. A demo movie for a horror game I've never heard of before, but that movie stuck with me. Staying as one of those games that you remember seeing, but you can't quite remember the name of it, until I just so happened to come across a review for the game while I was looking for some new Sega Saturn games to play. It all just came flooding back to me. Instead of focusing on visuals to get the scares across, they instead went for the ears, forcing players to listen to the game, and this makes it one of the scariest games I've ever played. So join me as I wander these hallowed halls, keeping my ear out and trying to survive the Sega Saturn classic that is Enemy Zero. Enemy Zero was originally planned to release on the PlayStation 1, however due to some issues between Sony and Warp, this did not happen. The story goes, Sony said that they will manufacture the pre-order units for the game, which was about 100,000 units. However, they told Eno, the game's director, that they only manufactured 40,000 units, which understandably made him very upset. However, this turned out to be a lie, as they only manufactured 28,000 units, so there are a lot of pre-orders that were flat out cancelled or delayed. So yeah, I can see how this would cause contention between Sony and Warp. In fact, they were that annoyed that they ended up jumping ship to the Sega Saturn early in development. Not before burning any possible bridges between the two of them, by revealing this in what is quoted as a dramatic press conference stunt, where after showing a trailer for Enemy Zero and showing the PlayStation logo proudly in the center, they warped it into the Sega Saturn one during a Sony conference. So that's one way they jump a pipe for the game. They also made sure to release all their newer games on Sega consoles going forward, not counting PC. So yeah, burning bridges would be a bit of an understatement in regards to this stunt. But from what people have said about Kenji Eno as a person, this is totally in character for him, so I have to respect the power play here. And the play worked. It was a relative success for the Sega Saturn, enough of one to get a port to the PC shortly after in 1998. However, despite this, not many people seem to talk about it when discussing older horror games. Usually people tend to talk about Resident Evil or Silent Hill when discussing old horror games of that generation. The fact that it was on the Saturn probably didn't help, as over in the West, sales were not as strong when you compare them to Sony's behemoth. This is also not really helped by the fact that the game hasn't seen a re-release on anything. D at least got a release on Good Old Games, but there's been nothing for the other 2 games in the D trilogy, locking the games into old hardware. So that means the only real way to play this game now is through the wonders of emulation. Unless you already have a Sega Saturn lying around and don't mind spending a few £100 for the game on eBay. Most people don't have this, so the best way to get the game is by sailing the 7 seas. Hopefully, somebody will make a PC port for this game or re-release it on modern systems. Maybe God could release the old PC port at some point. But for the meantime, emulation is probably the easiest way to play this classic. The plot of this game revolves around Laura, who has just been woken up from a cryogenic sleep, only to find out that the ship she is on is crawling with monsters that seem to be invisible to eyes. And the game does a good job showing this just from the intro cutscene alone. First, you see it break out of confinement, and then you see this pipe just get crushed by nothing. It's such a good way to show the main gimmick that the monsters cannot be seen, without having some random person tell the player, "Whoa, they're invisible, innit, bruv?" Another thing this game does well is humanize Laura as a character. There are some scenes in here that really help characterize her. One scene that still sticks to me is when you try to open this locker without a key and she just kicks it out of anger. It's great. But despite this, the plot itself is nothing new. If you watch films like Alien, you'll probably see the plot twist coming from a mile away, but the game frames these scenes so well you honestly don't mind it. The camera work for these cutscenes are generally really well done. It does feel like you're playing a movie at times. But how does this movie play? Enemy Zero is quite unique when you compare it against other horror games that came out around that time. Most horror games tend to make the monster the main attraction. Resident Evil 3's Nemesis is a good example of this, as the monster chases you down throughout most of the game. Dino Crisis isn't shy of showing off the dinosaurs and making them the main attraction, and Nightmare Creatures makes their varied monster designs apparent from the very first level. However, in what I think is a genius move, instead of focusing on visuals to get the scares across, they instead chose to focus on sound, as the monsters themselves are completely invisible. Because of this, the monsters stay scary even as the years go by. There's no 3D model that can age, it's just you and your imagination. Because of this, you have to take the game slow, listening to this chime to figure out where the monster is in relation to you. Your only means of defense being a slow as hell charge gun that only hits things when they're right up in your face. So, as you can expect, the difficulty is pretty hard, having to rely on your ears to carry you throughout the entire game. This isn't helped with the fact that you die in one hit. Thankfully, there is a training mode on one of the discs called Disc 0 because the devs wanted to be cute like that, which helps guide you through the main gameplay loop. This will get you used to how Laura controls as well, as you can feel a bit sluggish at first, and the game does give you a run button to help get you out of sticky situations pretty quickly. However, you'll find that she controls more like a car. You don't even need to hold anything if you're pressing the run button, she'll just go in the direction that she's facing. Walls will quickly become the bane of your existence. If you run into one, Laura will turn to the nearest clearing, even if you're moving backwards. So, if you're trying to make some room between you and a monster so you can charge up a shot and bump into a wall while walking backwards, Laura will instead choose to look at the side, leaving you open to getting your eyes gouged out. One thing that the training discs do not cover, however, are the room segments. At some points in the game, you'll be in this adventure game-like mode. You'll need to get a thing to use on a thing to get something that you can then use to progress the game. These are usually not that hard, just find something and interact with it, but there are some puzzles that will really get your head scratching, especially if you don't know things like binary. We will get into that. The chimes that are used to detect where the monsters are also have a lot more going on than meets the eye. For example, the pitch of the chime will change depending on where the monster is. If it's behind, it will be deeper. In front of you, it will be higher. To the sides, it will be like a mid-tone. The faster the chimes are also dictates how close the monster is to you, with this warning sound playing when they're right in front of your face. This is all used for you to time the use of your gun. Depending on how far you are in the game, guns can vary between unlimited shots to just one shot per charge, so you need to make sure you make each shot count. Along with this, the gun even takes a while to charge up the shot. And if you wait too long, it'll burn out, wasting that shot. So, you know, make sure not to do that. Thankfully, the monsters perish after one shot. However, as I said before, the same applies to you. So, if a monster gets up and attacks you, it's game over. Back to the last save point with you, no continues. The save mechanic is also quite unique for this game. It does the Resident Evil thing of using resources to save. However, unlike the guns that can be charged, you can't charge up the save device, so you've only got a limited amount of energy to save your game. Along with this, it costs resources to load as well. So, if you keep dying at the same area time and time again, you're going to run out of energy and you won't even be able to load your game, let alone save it. The game has 4 difficulty options, one being unlocked after certain criteria are met, and each difficulty has a different amount of charges on the save device. On both easy and beginner, they both have 99 charges. Normal drops at 99 down to 64, and hard mode drops you off even further to 16, because the developers hate you. One thing that beginner also gives you is an unlimited charge gun right off the bat, which kind of eliminates any real challenge the game has, but it's a good way to get used to how guns perform if you want some more hands-on experience. One thing that hard mode does that isn't the same with the other modes is it takes away your ability to move backwards to charge up a shot. I'm guessing Laura got her foot stuck on some space gum or something, I don't know. I ended up playing the game on easy mode for this video and streamed it on my Twitch channel for the spooky game of October. That's too many! I don't need to go about there. I think I'm fine. And I found the difficulty to be a pleasant enough ride throughout. It was challenging, but it wasn't too overbearing. The other difficulties are there for you if easy is too easy for you. Along with that, beginner is also there if you find easy too hard. The game is not overly long either. I think it took me around about 4 hours to beat the entire game. Even shorter if you know what you're doing. So, with gameplay focused on the scares and mechanics focused on stressing you out with resource management, does the level design and story take advantage of these? As I said before, if you start on the game for the first time, you'll start on disc 0. This isn't just because of the training mode, but it's also because the opening cutscene to the game's on here. There's no other way of watching it, not even on disc 1 when you start the game proper, it will just go straight to gameplay. The opening shows a door with E0 on it, bursting open and something coming out. Laura's taken out from her sub-zero nap and tries to call someone to see what's going on. Her friend Parker picks up the call and tries to talk, but it looks like the sound has been cut out, so you don't really know what Parker's saying. But shortly after picking up, something breaks into the room and Parker unfortunately meets his end. Then you swap over to disc 1 and start the game. When you load up disc 1, you're then shown Laura's room. Here, you can look on her PC, try and call some people, only for them all to decline, how rude, and to bring up the map. You will need this map. Remember this map. After collecting some stuff that you need to progress, you will then leave and be sent to the traversal side of the game. Here, there's no on-screen map, so I hope you remembered the map layout, otherwise you'd be walking around lost. And that's the main gameplay loop. You'll traverse the ship and look into each room for bits and pieces, solving any puzzles while avoiding the constant threat of losing progress. So, once you leave your room, you're supposed to go to one of the other rooms on the floor that you're on and go onto the PC there to turn off all the locks in the area of the ship that you're in. I'm sure the monsters won't use this to their advantage. Then, you can go to your locker, where you'll find, well, your locker. And this is where the game tells you to pay attention, because if you forgot to grab Laura's keycard from her room when the game started, well, I hope you remember the way there. In the locker is a keycard that you can use to get to the lower area of the ship. The lower area is where Parker's room is, which is where we need to go. However, it won't be a leisurely stroll, as one of the aliens has made its home right outside Parker's room, which is less than convenient. With no way to defend ourselves, we need to keep an ear out for the monster using the ding system I mentioned previously. Using that system to pinpoint where the monster is, so we can walk around it, avoiding the risk of getting our eyes gouged out. One thing you might notice while playing the game, especially in this area, is that the monsters move quite slow in this. It may sound threatening having the dings ring constantly in your ears, but as long as you're always on the move, they will very rarely catch up to you, unless you're walking directly at them or standing still. So what this area shows the player is you don't need to kill every monster in the game, you can just move around them. After some light espionage action, we find our way into Parker's room and confirm that, yes, he is dead. But after some snooping around, we find the access code to Kimberly's phone, meaning we can now call her. So, hopping on Parker's PC, we give her a call and find, oh no, she also has no audio. But it's good to know that one of our friends is still alive. Heading back upstairs, making sure to avoid the monster from before, we find that one has broken out upstairs, making a mess of things going from door to door. It's even killed one of the shipmates called Marcus. So, doing what any normal person would do, we pick up his fingers, use those fingers to open a safe and get his gun. Now with a way to defend ourselves, we can take out the monster that's been rampaging around, and also the one that took out Parker. A nice little detail that the game added is, if you do go back down and take out the monster that killed our friend, there's a little animation that plays afterwards. We can of course ignore them, but I'm sorry, you killed my friend, you must perish. Since there's nothing else to do on this floor, we hop onto an elevator to try and meet up with our friend Kimberly, only to get ambushed and we lose our gun. So, that was nice while it lasted. Running away from our sneaky assailant, we bump into a dead end. However, before we meet our grisly demise, we hear Kimberly from above telling us to jump into the air vents. So, using the C button, we look up to find that the entryway into the air vents has been opened. And since there's nowhere else for us to go, we climb up. This is the only time that this mechanic's really used. You can always use the C button to look up and down, but it's not really needed for gameplay, other than this one part. So, we slowly climb into the air vent. It's okay, Laura, take your time. And we make our way into the first real maze of the game. There are 2 monsters here, but we have no gun. This is a problem. There are also conveyor belts which can be used to help and hinder us. If you go on one that's going the same direction as you're moving, you'll go faster. The opposite applies if you're going up one that's going the other direction. This also applies to the monsters. So, if you're running up one conveyor belt which is going against you, and an alien sees you and goes on it as well, it can just zoom right into you, causing a game over. Our main focus while we're here is to find some way to defend ourselves. We did just lose our gun, but there has to be more than one lying around here somewhere. After scurrying around, we find another locker room with a computer. After interacting with the computer, it tells us, no, don't touch me there. However, we can still take the keycard that is nestled in the computer itself. Using this keycard, we can open the locker that's also in the room, giving us another gun. Unfortunately, unlike the previous gun, this one only holds 3 charges, so I hope you're a good shot. And you don't act like me, who wasted all 3 shots from the get-go trying to hit one alien. What do you mean? Oh, that's annoying. That's all the charges. I'd used all 3 charges in one go. You're not completely defenseless though. You can recharge these guns at certain charge points, and there is one here hidden in the maze. So if you do waste all 3 shots like I did, there is a way to recharge the gun. And you'll need at least 1 charge, because to even get out of the maze, you will need to blow up this door. Again, only time the game does this. Once you've done this, you finally meet up with Kimberly, one of the best characters in the game. There's such a warmth with her interactions towards Laura, you can tell she genuinely cares. After catching up and being glad that they're not dead, they decide to call the other team members to try and see who's still alive. David seems to be okay, however, the other teammates are not. Calling Parker's phone in front of Kim, you see her break down.
Parker! Oh please, Parker! Ah!
She then talks about how her and Parker were intimate. Hell, Laura's even at her wedding. Which is surprising because Laura seems to be taking this as it's brand new news. Wanting some time to collect her thoughts, she decides to walk off for a little bit. Which probably isn't the best idea since the ship is still infested with invisible aliens that can kill very easily. Calling David again to talk about how nice it is being alive, you realise that Laura and David are also together. It looks like being put under cryosleep has some sort of effect on your memory. David mentions that he's been hurt, and that you and Kimberly should walk all the way to where he is, which, bearing in mind the ship is full of invisible enemies, yeah, sure, why not? Not like we've got anything better to do. After this, Kimberly walks back in and says, yeah, let's go and meet up with the other guys. By the way, David's so reliable. To which I say, dude's asking us to walk through a monster-infected ship. What do you mean he's reliable? And that's the end of Disc 1. If you thought the plot was interesting and you don't want to be spoiled, you can skip ahead to here to hear my final thoughts. However, if you don't really care, please continue watching. Disc 2 starts off with Laura and Kimberly walking down an aisle, with Kim giving some unique advice on how to proceed.
It's to stare your enemy in the eyes and never, ever look away. Just like taking care of a baby. That's right. This time, our enemy is nothing but a spoiled little brat.
Kim, the monsters are invisible. You can't look at them in the eyes. You can't look at them, period. What are you on about? After she chooses to go in by herself to get the access codes for the main elevator, she is quickly ambushed, and not wanting to leave our friend in the dirt, we run after them to help. After running to her aid, we find there's a big blood splatter, and the gun that we lent her. So we press on to the service elevator to try and get the access codes for the big main one. There are a lot of elevators in this game. But to even use the service elevator, we need to go through one of the more complicated puzzles in the game. Do you know binary? Well, you're gonna have to. To condense it into a really simple matter, it basically consists of two numbers, 1 and 0. Each digit in a sequence is called a bit or binary digit. And depending on where they are in a sequence, it will increase the size of the factor by 2. So, to get 5 as an example, you will need 101. It is using coding, and it's not really something anybody will know on the top of their head. Now, you're probably wondering, Chaz, why the binary lesson? Well, the only way to operate the service elevator is through binary. The switches representing 1 and 0, 1 being down, 0 being up. So, to get to level 7 where we need to go, we need to put all of the switches in the up position. This isn't the only area of the game that uses binary though. Soon after this, we need to decipher a code that's in binary to be able to enter one of our crewmates' rooms. So after figuring out the binary to get to floor 7 and figuring out the binary code to enter this door, we go in to check on our friend Ronnie, to find out that Ronnie has also met his untimely demise. However, this isn't the first dead body that we've seen today. We investigate the corpse to find his Ray-Bans and we put them on while looking at his calendar. Only to find that he's hidden his computer password on the calendar for some reason. Entering this into the PC, we can snoop around his files and we find one called Aki, which reveals that the whole mission was to get these invisible creatures over to our contractor so they can use them as potential BOWs. And that the life of the monster is a higher priority than the life of the crew. Basically meaning that everybody who works on that ship is seen as disposable by them. After reading it, Laura has a very natural response and breaks down crying. Which, let's face it, I can understand. If you're fighting tooth and nail to even survive, only to find out that your employer views the life of those things that are trying to kill you as more important, I will probably be very upset as well. This also helps humanize Laura, because one issue I had with several games that do the find a note and read it kind of storytelling is the characters don't react. One common example I can think of is in Resident Evil, where you find a picture of your then boss Albert Wesker standing amongst other Umbrella scientists in Resident Evil 1. Chris or Jill, depending on who you play as, just look at this photo and then don't do anything. Where's your reaction? That's your boss. You should be surprised. You should have questions. You should be going, hold up, what's this? Why is he here? Instead of just not doing anything. Anyway, tangent over, back to the game. Going down to level 5, we run in and see our pal George, the one who didn't want us going on his computer before, and after checking that he's still alive and well, we then go to see our partner David. And after a romantic reunion, he goes off to check on the storage room, despite the fact that he said he took damage before, so I just think he didn't want to make the journey. The lazy bum. After snooping around and finding a picture of ourselves on his bed, we then go to talk to George, who might be a little bit too attached to Laura.
Laura, when you have a problem, come directly to me first. There is only one person who understands you, and that is me.
Since there's nothing for us to do up here, we go down to the storage area where David said he was going to. Unfortunately, it looks like we were too late, as the monsters have already got David. We also find out that David's a robot. And this isn't just news to us, as not even David was aware of this. After he passes, we yoink the brain chip out of his head and make our way back upstairs, and immediately upload his brain chip onto George's PC to see if we can at least try and shed some light on what's going on here. Unfortunately, Laura forgot to turn on the ding system and we got ourselves ambushed, the alien trying to force us to drink its sweet, sweet fluids. Thankfully, George saves us from possible inflation, and he sees that we've been snooping around on his PC. But before we can ask him any questions, he starts to act defensively, reflectively, and also tries to gaslight us, so yeah, just a little bit suspicious.
What did you see? The file on David? I don't know anything. I'm only... Look, don't you know it was rude looking into someone else's things without permission? I have no obligation to explain anything to you at all.
He then runs off, but not before dropping some sort of key in the hallway. So, we're now infected with something weird, and we need to scan ourselves somewhere. Thankfully, our friend Robbie has a scanner in his room. Back up to floor 7 we go. Once we're there, we use Ronnie's medical scanning device to scan ourselves. And we can see that the alien has put some weird thing in our neck. I'm going to call it Timmy. Along with this, we also find out that we're also a robot, just like David. But before Laura can break down even further from this, George comes in and starts talking about resetting us to factory settings. Not liking the sound of that, Laura makes a run for it. With no real place left to go, we run back into David's room, where George is very quick on our tail. Unfortunately for him, like what we did earlier, he forgot to put on his ding device, so he gets caught unawares. And, as thanks for saving us from the person who's trying to reset us, we shoot the alien in the face. My main issue with this entire segment is there's a lot of back and forth. We're going up the elevator, then down the elevator, then back up it again, having to figure out the binary puzzle each time. And then watching the cutscenes, it can kind of feel like a drag, since there isn't really that many monsters around this area apart from the one that's in the basement area with David. It's around here where I wish there was a skip cutscene button for the ones that you keep on watching time and time again. So, with George now dead, we're the only ones that seem to be alive at the moment. Great. We loot George's body for the access card and then make our way down to the power room on floor 6. This is a maze. Simple as. There's one monster roaming around, but this space is so big and there's so many rooms that it's hard to even pinpoint where the monster is. Is it in the room with you now, or is it in the corridor next to you? It's really hard to tell. When streaming this myself, I often found myself just running around in circles. You can use PCs in this disc and get the map layout of the area, maybe screenshot it or jot it down on a piece of paper. That will help a lot with this, but if you go in blind, you will run yourself around in circles. After enough trial and error, mostly error, we find ourselves at the power room, and after turning the power back on, we're back in business. Now to jump back into the elevator and set course to the first floor. This floor is just one long shaft. We use George's keycard on the keypad in front of us and we find ourselves in the main elevator. Like I said, there's a lot of elevator usage in this game. And, since it's the first time that we can relax since the game started, Laura takes a seat, but not before Timmy decides to make a nuisance of himself and start flaring out, causing her some severe neck pain. After riding the pain out, the elevator stops and we make our way out. And that's the end of disc 2. Not as strong as the first disc. I feel like the first disc was a lot better at keeping the scares going. In disc 2, like I said earlier, there's a lot of back and forth. It feels like this disc is a lot more character focused, which is alright, but after the strong start of Disc 1, it does feel like the game slowing down a bit. Disc 3, however, throws you right into the thick of it from the get-go. It starts off with a multi-level gauntlet, so make sure you save before leaving this elevator, because if you die, and you will die, it's back to Disc 2 with you. You have to make your way down 9 floors, each different from the last, and the game throws these smaller monsters at you, which can be seen, which is good, and they don't require you to charge at begun, but you can't detect them using your ding device. They do make their own noise though, so it's not all bad. However, like with their invisible brethren, one touch, and it is game over. Thankfully, however, partway through the gauntlet, you find David's helmet with his fully loaded gun which never runs out of energy in it. Sweet, so now you can shoot with reckless abandon. You can also save here, so it's a nice little checkpoint between the 9 levels. After making your way down the 9 levels, you'll find what seems to be a giant beating heart. No idea what this is, it's not really detailed in the game's plot from what I can see, but like most things you don't understand, you shoot at it and it perishes. Making our way through the hole we just shot through the heart, we meet back with Kimberly, who managed to survive the entire time. She also gets rid of Timmy, so that's a bonus. She details that she's been in on the entire mission from the start, knowing about the monsters that are on the ship, and also says that Parker was aware as well. And, while it's touching to see two friends reunite, I have several questions. First, why not tell Laura and David? If they're robots, why the secrecy? Second, she mentions that Laura and David were at their wedding. Did they get married on the ship on the way to the mission, or was it before? If it was before, why were Laura and David there if there were robots to help with the mission? Third, why did the alien try and put something in Laura's neck instead of just outright killing her? Lastly, if they were made to help with the mission, what's their purpose? Why program robots with such complex human emotions if it's just to help with this? I do understand that I'm nitpicking here. It's obviously not the point of the game's plot, and who knows, I might have missed some lore somewhere that explains everything I just asked. But these issues just spring into mind when I'm playing this game. After the joyful reunion, Kim activates the ship's self-destruct sequence before asking Laura to leave because Kim's not going with her. Parker is waiting for her, which is a bit ominous since Parker's dead. Not wanting to see her friend go, we give chase. However, unfortunately we are too late. Kim takes her own life to be there with Parker, and we get to see Laura react to losing yet another person she cares deeply about. Honestly, I just feel bad for Laura at this point. The whole scene is done well. Laura's reaction is great at conveying the emotions that one would go through seeing a traumatic scene such as this. After reading their chat logs, we are interrupted with the ship reminding us that it is going to explode any time now. So we run back to where the escape shuttle was, only for our pinging device to give up the ghost on the final stretch. Missing our only way to detect the monsters, we're practically sitting ducks right now. Before losing to despair, however, we are joined by David, who, somehow, was able to upload himself to the ship's intercom. Being a robot has its perks, I guess. He then acts as our pinging device, telling us where to go and if there's monsters nearby.
Forward. The enemy is near. Go right.
It's a really well done part and helps build tension as you only have his voice to go off. Once you make your way through, you board the escape ship and we jet out of here, the station exploding behind us. Not wanting to sit down and do nothing for God knows how many years, we decide to head back to cryosleep, with David keeping tabs on the ship for us, uploading his consciousness onto the escape ship. And that's the end of the game. Roll the credits. There is no game like Enemy Zero. No, wait, no. Let me rephrase that. There is no game that feels like Enemy Zero. The gameplay loop is completely unique. The save system, while similar to Resident Evil's ink ribbon system, goes even further with it. The framing of the cutscenes make it feel like a movie, and the music helps elevate the sad moments to be all the more tragic. It's a boiling pot of different systems, all working together in tandem to make something truly unique, and I love it. It's a downright travesty that there's no legit way to play this on modern systems outside of emulation. This is the very kind of game that emulation is made for, because without that, there would be no real way to play this game without forking over some money on eBay. It's not perfect, however. As neat of an idea the chiming system is, when there are multiple enemies around, it becomes really hard to keep tabs on where things are. If there was going to be a remake or remaster of some sort, making it so the chimes will come from the left or right speaker when they're around there would help a lot when it comes to trying to locate where the monsters are. I understand why this was not available at the time. Stereo speakers were not the norm back then, so locking out some of the player base because they lacked the proper speakers probably would not go down well back then. Along with this, as much as I do love the cutscenes, making some of them skippable would help a lot, because whenever you die in the game, you're booted back to the start, so you have to sit through several FMVs of Laura holding the recording device, listening to the audio log, and then boom, you're back in the game, all unskippable. So it adds a lot to the aggravation of dying constantly. Adding a skip function would make the process seem more streamlined. However, I understand that these are just nitpicks. The game is perfectly playable as it is, and it's not long at all. As stated previously, it only took me under 5 hours to beat the game, and that's with dying several times. Unfortunately, as much as I sing the game's praises, the game has been sent to the realms of obscurity, forever destined to be a bizarre footnote in the Sega Saturn's varied library. Maybe in the future, the game will be able to strike out of that slump. There was a PC release, so who knows, like D before it, it might get released on that storefront someday, and it will be able to scare a new generation of people with its unique gameplay style again. All we can do is keep an ear out. Hello! Hope you enjoyed the video. Fancied playing a spooky game in time for the spooky season. I was hoping that this video would be shorter than the Silent Bomber video, but as you can see, that was not the case. I would like to thank the people who joined me on Twitch while I was playing this to keep me company, to make sure that I didn't, cry in fear. The full VOD can be found on the Chazwhick Gaming VOD channel, which will be linked in the description below. In the meantime, if you like the sound of my voice, please consider subscribing. I set myself a goal to get 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and you guys smashed that. Not only did you smash the 100 goal, you also smashed the 150 goal that I had as a backup, so thank you. Honestly, it means a lot. If you want to hear more of my ramblings, you can also follow me on Twitch. I'm also on Twitter and Blue Sky as well. And yeah, that's it off me. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a spooktacular Halloween. Bye.
Ah!